Pack your bags. Blood family keeps the house. His voice filled my living room like bad weather. I was still in a black funeral dress from yesterday. Boxes were open. Hands I did not trust were touching what I loved. My grandmother's rocking chair scraped across the floor. Wedding photos landed on the porch like junk mail. I said one quiet sentence. You do not have the right. He smiled as if the word right were a joke. Marcus is gone. You are not blood. Property returns to family. What he did not know, my husband had seen all of this coming. Months earlier, he had drawn a legal circle around our life, deeds rewritten, a will that left no gaps, a letter that named cruelty by name, and a clause that punished anyone who tried to contest what was already decided. They expected a widow who would fold. They got a wife with documents. My name is Ashley Coleman. For 8 years, I loved a gentleman who healed animals and believed people could do better. He could not save the people who refused to be saved. He did save me. Tonight, they will learn the difference between tradition and the law. Richmond air felt like wet cotton as I turned onto our street. The funeral had been yesterday. The grief was today, tomorrow, and as far as I could see. I parked in front of the Victorian with the porch swing we had painted honey yellow last spring. Lights were on inside. Not mine. The key did not turn. The lock had been changed. Through the window, I watched men move through rooms I had dusted and mopped and filled. My husband's brother lifted a box marked library. Another brother carried out Marcus's reading chair with the same careless grip he used on arguments. In the center of the living room stood their father, Raymond, arms folded, stance wide, the posture of a man who believes the world owes him a bow. I rang the bell, then opened the door with the calm of a nurse who has walked into worse. No panic, no raised voice. Panic is a gift you hand to bullies. I have given enough gifts. Ashley, Raymond said, as if my name were a problem that had arrived early. We are transitioning the property. The property, I repeated. This is my home. He shrugged. Was your home. Marcus was generous. Now the property returns to the bloodline. Behind him, Gerald and Timothy, names I had learned to place with noise, hauled my grandmother's rocker toward the van. That chair is mine, I said. It is from my mother's side. Raymond did not look back. We will leave your personal items on the porch. Take them by sunset. Inside my ribs, something cold settled and went still. Grief had been a river. This was ice. Marcus would not want this, I said. Marcus is dead, he snapped. And he was soft when it came to you. We warned him. The words hit like small stones. I did not flinch. They expected flinching. Where is your attorney? I asked softly. He actually laughed. Girl, this is family business. We have handled property longer than your people have owned it. I could have argued. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called the one number Marcus had told me to call if this day came. Charles, I said when the estate lawyer answered. They are inside. Locks changed. They are moving items now. Do not engage, he said. Do not raise your voice. I am 20 minutes away. Let them document their ignorance. I slipped the phone into my pocket, stepped aside, and watched. Every item they touched became proof. Every word they said became a line in a future affidavit. I stood with my back straight and my hands empty. A nurse stance. Present, precise, unshakable. Raymond directed his sons as if orchestrating a harvest. Take the china. Leave the cheap plates. Box the silver. Put the practice files aside. He did not notice that every command he gave wrote a confession. Marcus had warned me. They do not listen unless a judge is speaking. The driveway filled with boxes that contained a life built over 8 years. A marriage of morning coffee and late calls from the clinic, of porch plants, dog hair, tax files, and 1,000 small mercies. Grief pressed against my throat. I swallowed. The house smelled like lemon oil and disrespect. A silver sedan pulled in behind my car. The engine clicked, cooling. Charles stepped out with a leather briefcase and a look that said the weather had changed. He crossed the yard as if the grass itself recognized the law. "Mr. Coleman," he said evenly in the doorway, "we need to speak." Raymond turned, still wearing confidence like a hat that did not fit. "Who are you?" "Marcus Coleman's attorney," Charles said, opening the briefcase. "The man whose estate you are attempting to dismantle without authority. Please stop touching what is not yours." Silence fell with weight. In that silence, I could hear Marcus's voice from months before. "We will make it simple, Ash. Simple does not mean weak." Charles laid documents on the kitchen table. The table where I had rolled pie dough and graded papers for continuing ed, where Marcus had signed rabies certificates and scribbled notes for surgeries. He tapped one page with one finger. "This is the deed," he said. "Joint ownership with right of survivorship. It was recorded years ago. At my client's death, full title passed to his wife." Raymond flushed. "Family property returns to blood." "Family property follows title," Charles said, "and title follows the deed." He placed the will beside the deed. "This document is 6 months old, witnessed and notarized. It leaves everything to Ashley Coleman. The house, the practice, accounts, personal property, everything." Patricia stepped in from the hall, pearl earrings flashing like punctuation. "She is not blood." "Under Virginia law," Charles said, voice smooth as clean glass, "a spouse is family, and in this case, the spouse is also the owner." Then Charles opened a folded letter in Marcus's careful handwriting. He did not need to read all of it. He read enough. "To my family, if you are reading this, I am no longer here to protect my wife. For 8 years, I have watched you make her small. I do not permit you to finish that project." Raymond sank into a chair that did not belong to him. The room went quiet, in the way a room goes quiet when lies run out of oxygen. Outside, the van door slid shut. The first load was still on the driveway. I looked at my grandmother's rocker and thought of all the evenings I had sat in it with Marcus's head in my lap, the dog's paws twitching as it chased dream rabbits across some inner field. I thought, we kept our promises. Now we will keep his. I was not born into rooms where people whisper their deals. I was raised in rooms where people count pills, fold towels, and show up for double shifts. I put myself through nursing school 1 bus route and 2 scholarships at a time. I learned how to keep a steady hand when hands around me shook. When I first met Marcus, I did not think about property or bloodlines. I thought about his hands on a trembling dog, his laugh when a cat swatted the pen from his pocket, his habit of bringing home strays that needed 3 days of quiet and a bowl of boiled chicken. He had the soft eyes of a person who sleeps badly after a hard case. He brought me to Sunday dinner after 6 months of dating. His mother's smile was warm at the edges and cold in the center. "You are very practical," Patricia said, as if diagnosing something that might require antibiotics. His father asked me about my people, meaning, prove yourself, then we will tell you why that is still not enough. During our engagement, the conversation turned from cake to contracts. Raymond called it a pre-wedding discussion, the way a dentist calls a root canal a procedure. "Family property remains in family lines," he said. "House, land, practice. Business is business." Marcus shifted in his chair and tried to steer the talk to honeymoon plans. I smiled and swallowed my temper whole. I knew the rule of some families. They test your patience to measure your worth, then punish you for passing. The small slights accumulated like sand, individually harmless, collectively heavy. A place card moved to the far end of the table. A story that ended when I entered the room. Invitations that assumed I would be working holidays. Comments about daughters of friends who had gone to private colleges, as if pedigree were a personality trait you could attach to a soul with a ribbon. Marcus saw more than they thought he did. After one Sunday, he came into the kitchen, put his arms around me and said, "You do not have to hold your breath to fit in." He was gentle, not blind. The moment that shifted the ground arrived at a cousin's wedding 3 months before the diagnosis. While I was in the restroom, I heard Timothy's voice sliding through the hall. "When Marcus goes, the property returns to us, right?" Raymond's answer was casual, almost bored. "Wives get temporary rights. Real property returns to blood. Always has." The confidence in those words told me this script had been rehearsed. I dried my hands, returned to the table, and found Marcus talking with his elderly uncle about wing fractures and release plans. I watched his face as he listened, open, absorbing, alive. I made a choice. On the drive home, I said, "Your family discussed the future of my life without me." He listened without interrupting. He drove 4 quiet blocks. Then he said, "We will fix this with paper." At our kitchen table that night, he brought out a folder I did not know he kept. "I changed the deeds the week after we married," he said. "Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. If I die first, everything is yours automatically." I stared at him, the way you stare at a person you love and discover the steel under the kindness. "And the practice?" I asked. "I bought out my father's share 3 years ago," he said. "It is mine outright, which is to say, ours." He slid more documents across the table, a will, newly drafted, beneficiaries named without hesitation, a letter written in his careful hand. "Charles is holding copies," he said. "He knows when to act. He knows who you are. He knows who they are." I read the letter. It recorded what I had endured, dismissals, exclusions, the slow drip of contempt. It also recorded what he had seen, work, care, joy, and the life we made that had nothing to do with a fence line. "I hoped we would never need to use this," he said. "I hoped they would choose love over lineage." He took my hands. "But hope is not a plan. This is a plan." We put the folder away and went outside to deadhead roses. We watered tomatoes. We called the dog inside. We slept well. 6 weeks later, the doctor said the word no house should have to hear. Pancreas. Stage 4. Months, not years. We cried. Then we drew closer to the plan. The oncologist spoke in the voice good doctors learn. Honest, measured, kind. "If we are aggressive, maybe 8 months, she said. Marcus thanked her as if she had just refilled his coffee. In the parking lot, he squeezed my hand and said, "Call Charles." The attorney came to our home 3 times while chemotherapy carved its path. He brought language like armor and explained each piece until I could recite it back. He added a no contest clause, a quiet guard dog that lives in a paragraph. He cross-checked beneficiary designations on every account, the way you cross-check meds on a night shift when the unit is full and the alarms keep singing. He updated durable powers. He put copies in a vault that does not care who is offended. Marcus kept working as long as he could. Less surgery, more consults, all heart. He sat on the floor with a worried kid and let a tarantula walk across his wrist, because fear can learn from calm. He wrote thank you notes to the staff who stayed late. He prepped the team for a handoff that he hoped would not come too soon. Meanwhile, his family mistook frequent visits for care, an inventory for love. They touched frames. They measured sideboards. They asked about original glass. Patricia asked where I planned to live after, the word purposely vague and somehow sharp. "Here," I said. "This is my home." She and Raymond traded a look that said, "She does not understand." 2 days before the end, I overheard Gerald and Timothy in the hall outside our bedroom. "We should change the locks," one whispered. "Move out the valuable pieces before the funeral. Dad already spoke to a new vet in Henrico." Henrico. Not even the county name could land soft in my ears. They were dividing a life while the man who built it lay 10 feet away, learning to let go. That night I told Marcus what I had heard. His eyes, tired, bright, flashed with more anger than his body could carry. "Then we were right to plan," he whispered. "Promise me you will not let them frighten you. Promise me you will let paper speak." "I promise," I said. It felt like a vow a 3rd time. Once at our wedding, once at the table with the folder, once here at the edge of breath. On a Tuesday morning in October, light came through the trees in gold strips. Marcus exhaled, and the room became wider than before. I held his hand and said the words you say when you mean all of them. Thank you. I love you. Rest. 2 days later, St. Paul's filled with people who had known him by the gentle things he did when no one clapped. Free spay days, after-hours checks, a fox released at dawn behind the clinic where only 3 volunteers watched and cried. The family arranged the service and put me in the second row. I did not contest it. Every small indignity from them added weight to the letter he had left behind. At the cemetery, Raymond spoke as if the future were a schedule. "We will give you a few days," he said. "Then we will prepare the house for Gerald's family." He had an answer for everything except the truth. "I am family," I said. He flinched as if the word had teeth. I slept that night at my sister Janet's house in Glen Ellen, where rage rose like bread. "They cannot put you out of your own home," she said. "Call a lawyer." "Marcus already did," I said, "months ago." The next morning I drove back, intending to go inside and sit with our things. I found trucks instead. I found a van. I found men who brought their sense of entitlement and left their sense of shame at home. The rest you know. Charles read, Raymond sagged, boxes returned, locks were changed again, this time to my key. The practice remained mine to run or to sell on my own terms. The story that had kept their pride fed for decades met a document and starved. Neighbors heard how it had gone. Patrons heard. Donors heard. The social weather shifted. Respect that had been extended to Raymond out of habit became silence, which is what some men hear when the world finally stops humoring them. In the quiet after, I stood at the kitchen table with Marcus's letter in my hands. I read it again, this time as a benediction. The house around me looked the same. The house inside me had changed. I did not win anything. My husband and I had already built it. He simply made sure no one could steal it the minute my back was turned. I put the letter in a folder, the folder in a safe, and the safe where I could see it every morning when I made coffee. Paper shields, yes, but also love, written down. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The paper spoke. He finished the paragraph from Marcus's letter and let the silence settle. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome for decency. Outside, a crow called once and flew on. Inside, the men who had called me temporary discovered they were the guests. "Here is what happens next," Charles said, arranging the documents into a small, precise stack. "You will return every item removed. You will leave the premises. You will not re-enter without Mrs. Coleman's written permission. If you do, we will involve law enforcement and pursue civil remedies." Raymond tried to reclaim air with a scoff. "You would call the police on family." Charles met his eyes. "On trespassers." Gerald looked from me to the rocker and back again. Something human flickered across his face, the kind of decency that loses the vote in families like this and still tries to speak. "Put it back," he told Timothy. His brother hesitated. "Put it back," Gerald repeated, voice lower, older. They returned the chair. The van door slid open. Boxes came off, not on. Patricia hovered, not on. Patricia hovered near the hallway, cheeks pinched at the edges. "This is unseemly," she whispered to no one, which is how guilt addresses itself. Charles handed me a card for a bonded locksmith he trusted. "Have the locks rekeyed today," he said. "Keep a log of what was disturbed. We will document it all." I nodded. "Thank you." Raymond pushed himself to standing and attempted one last performance of authority. "We will, of course, review this with our counsel." "You should," Charles said pleasantly. "And please inform your counsel that any challenge will trigger the no contest clause. They will advise you." He collected the papers, slid them into the briefcase, and turned to me. "May I borrow your table 1 minute more?" he asked, as if we had just finished coffee. He wrote a brief summary on his pad, tore the sheet, and handed it to me. "For your records," he said. His calm steadied the floor. The Coleman men filed out in a thin parade. On the porch, Raymond paused, looked over his shoulder, and found me watching. He searched my face for triumph, something he could hate and handle. I offered him nothing, only a level gaze, only air he did not control. They drove away. The yard exhaled. The locksmith arrived within the hour, a compact woman with a canvas tool bag and forearms that told the truth about her work. "Sorry for your loss," she said, and got to it. Pins clicked in cylinders. Old keys became scrap. New keys stacked warm in my palm, small metal vowels for a new language. I walked the house with a notebook and my phone, documenting. A drawer left open here. A picture frame shifted there. A missing box of clinic files that Charles later recovered with one stern message to Raymond's counsel. I took photographs the way nurses take vitals, regularly, calmly, with dates and times and a steady hand. Neighbors began to drift by as the afternoon became evening. Mrs. Hahn from 2 doors down brought a casserole and news, both still warm. "They were bold," she said softly. "Too bold. I am glad you had someone on your side who knows paper." I thought of Marcus and said, "So am I." When the sun slid behind maples, the house settled into its true shape. Ours. The dog lay by the rocker as if guarding both grief and wood. I sat and opened the letter again. Marcus's handwriting marched across the page with the same quiet confidence he used when signing a surgical consent after explaining every risk. He had listed specifics. He had named patterns. He had written one sentence that felt like a hand on my back. "You are my family, in blood or not, because love makes lineage." I slept that night in our bed with the window cracked. Crickets counted the dark. I woke before dawn and brewed coffee in the quiet. The first light found the kitchen table, and for the first time in days I did not brace. Morning brings lists. I have always trusted lists. I met Charles at his office with a folder under my arm and purpose in my shoes. He greeted me with a nod that contained both condolence and respect. On the conference table long enough to host a wedding party, he spread out charts, copies, certified seals. "We will file a notice with the court that the will has been read and accepted," he said. "We will record the survivorship deed so no clerk can claim confusion. We will send a formal warning to the Coleman Council covering trespass, conversion, and any further interference with the practice." I signed where tabs marked the margins in bright flags. He explained in measured phrases and waited for my questions. When he finished, he sat back and studied my face. "How are you?" he asked, as if the answer might require counsel too. "I am sad," I said, "and I am steady." He nodded. Steady changes outcomes. On the way home, I stopped at the bank. The manager had known Marcus by first name and by the habit of passing out dog biscuits at the counter. "We are sorry for your loss," she said, and moved with smooth speed through the file that transferred every account to my name. Beneficiaries were already listed as me. Signatures changed. Cards ordered. A new binder clipped shut with a sound like a period. At the clinic, the team hugged me in the quiet way people hug when love has a job to do. We met in the break room that smelled like coffee and kibble and friendship. I told them the practice was secure. I told them I would keep operations steady while we decided as a group what comes next. "What about that other doctor?" the receptionist asked, eyebrows bent at the word other. "Dr. Peterson reached out," I said. "He inquired about a buyout as if it were a foregone conclusion. I declined, and I asked him not to contact our clients." The techs exhaled. "Good," one said, and the single syllable lifted the room. We set a plan. Senior associates would rotate call. I would handle business decisions with Charles's guidance. Payroll would be early for a month to ease nerves. We would offer grief counseling for staff and a quiet memorial for clients who wanted to light a candle and tell a story about the animal Marcus had helped back to joy. The memorial night surprised me. People came in a gentle stream. A teenager with blue hair brought a photo of the one-eyed rabbit Marcus had saved in 7th grade science fair fashion and later declared his best patient. An older couple cried while describing the morning they had said goodbye to their terrier and how Marcus had knelt on the floor with them so the dog would not be frightened by height. A postal worker in uniform said, "He always asked how my knees were," and pressed a stamp sheet into my hand as if blessing me in the language he knew. The news about the house traveled the way all real news travels, through mouths that had seen the thing, and through minds that understood the shape of fairness when they saw it. A woman at the grocery store touched my arm lightly and said, "Good, only that." I carried those 4 letters home like a small metal key. Patricia called once. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brittle. "We should discuss heirlooms," she said. "There are pieces that belong to the family. They belong to the owner," Charles wrote back to their counsel, "who is Mrs. Coleman." Eleanor types in other stories recover by apologizing. Patricia wrote a letter instead. Thick paper, severe pen, a performance of dignity. It did not contain the word sorry. It did contain the phrase, "for the sake of appearances." I filed it behind the will in a tab labeled Records, not Truths. Gerald's wife, Tamara, sent a short text from an unknown number. It read, "I am sorry, that is all." It was enough. Raymond did not call. Men like him do not dial when the line runs both ways. I sat with the decisions I now held. Run the practice alone, or sell to the associates in time. Keep the house, or move closer to my sister. The power to choose felt almost heavy, the kind of weight you take on with both hands because it is yours. That evening, I set 3 envelopes on the table for tomorrow's mail. A donation to the wildlife rescue in Marcus's name. A bonus for the clinic manager who had carried more than her share. A check to the locksmith that included a tip and a note for showing up fast on a hard day. That is what the law looks like in daylight. Signatures, transfers, receipts, and a woman writing small checks that say thank you to the world that held. Fall moved through Richmond with cinnamon on its breath. Leaves turned and let go. The city forgave the trees. People less so. I did not seek news of the Colemans. News arrived anyway. At the club Patricia favored, her circle began to thin. Not in a dramatic exodus, but in the quiet way people adjust their calendars to avoid a table that tells the wrong story about who they are. A fundraiser chair regretfully accepted her resignation with a letter that praised her years of service and did not invite her to the next planning session. At church, whispers softened when she passed the font. There are sins parishes forgive quickly. Attempting to dispossess a widow is not one. Gerald's children had been promised bedrooms with chimney views. They were promised again a different future, a smaller place, a longer drive, a father who stared longer than usual at bills on the kitchen table. Tamara found me once outside the grocery and thanked me for not telling the whole city how loudly the men had spoken when they thought they were alone. "We are trying to teach our kids better," she said, eyes wet but clear. "Thank you for not making them carry this." Timothy learned that the job he believed would be his at the clinic was both fiction and insult. He went elsewhere. Pride went with him. Pride did not help him lift. Raymond walked shorter in the shoulders. Authority looks different on a man when the town learns his son trusted law more than lineage. He still commanded his voice to boom in public. It reached fewer ears. I did not gloat. I watered the houseplants and changed the filter on the furnace and met with the associates to sketch a future that did not require me to be in 2 buildings at once. We agreed on a path, a gradual sale to the doctors Marcus had mentored, with conditions that mattered to him written into the contract. Free clinics would continue. Emergency funds would remain for clients hit by hard luck. Staff would earn a profit share every winter because gratitude is not seasonal. Charles structured the deal in sentences a judge would admire. The doctors cried when we signed, then laughed at themselves for crying, then cried again. Grief is a busy river. It makes its own turns. On a soft afternoon, I walked the property with a clipboard and a pencil and wrote what was next for the house. Repair the porch rail where a hand had leaned too hard. Repaint the back bedroom a color that knew how to hold light. Keep the rocker in the bay window where morning liked to sit. I opened windows and let the air move through. The rooms felt relieved. A letter arrived by certified mail from the Coleman Council proposing a family mediation regarding select heirlooms. Charles drafted a 2-paragraph reply. It began with the phrase, "We decline," and ended with, "Please refrain from further contact except through counsel." The envelope went out with the afternoon pickup. I brewed tea and sat on the steps while the postal truck turned the corner, carrying away work I did not have to do. At night, I sometimes dreamed of Marcus in the clinic hallway, files under one arm, a grin starting, a dog trotting too fast on the tile. I woke not shattered, but softened. Love does not leave. It rearranges its furniture. I kept a small ritual. Each Sunday evening, I set one chair at the kitchen table with a folded napkin and a letter on top. I wrote him a page about the week, what I fixed, what I learned, what I let go. I told him about the teenager who now volunteers at the wildlife rescue because he once taped a broken sparrow wing in our kitchen for practice. I told him about the associate who found her own steel while negotiating a vendor contract. I told him about the day I did not think about the funeral until dusk. On the first Sunday of Advent, I wrote only one sentence. It read, "I am safe." Safety is not a dramatic ending. It is a door that locks and opens on your own key. It is a deed that carries your name. It is a practice that survives the man who loved it because he planned for it to survive. It is your grandmother's rocker returned to sunlight. It is neighbors who wave from porches and mean it. As winter edged closer, I placed one more document in the safe. A copy of my own new will, updated with the clarity grief had purchased. It left the house to my sister's kids with language that made my lawyer smile. It left the practice proceeds to the staff fund that would keep the doors open for families who needed time. It left a letter that said, "Love is the only bloodline I choose." The pen felt heavy and right. The safe door closed with a seal. Paper shields. Living love. I made dinner. I ate at the table. I slept without bracing. Morning would ask for steady hands again. I was ready. 3 days after the locks were changed, a courier delivered a thick envelope from the Coleman Council. The subject line tried to sound neutral, notice of intent to contest. The body tried to sound confident. Long-standing family customs, equitable claims, constructive trust. It did not say the quiet part out loud. We are angry that paper does not bow to us. I forwarded the scan to Charles and brewed coffee. He called before the kettle clicked. They filed an intent, he said, voice dry as good toast. Not a suit, a posture. What happens if they file? I asked. We file back, he said. And then their posture meets the clause your husband placed like a tripwire. If they challenge, they forfeit any possible inheritance. In this case, there is nothing for them to forfeit, which makes the clause a mirror. It reflects their motives to the court. 2 days later, the notice became a letter that was shorter and more polite. It requested family mediation at a neutral site. Charles drafted a response that carried exactly the right amount of weather. We decline, it said. Title and will are clear. Further contact should be through counsel only. The next morning, Raymond showed up anyway. Not at my door, at the clinic. The front desk called my cell with a whisper. He is here, the receptionist said. He wants to speak to the owner. I walked out from the office with my shoulders square and my badge clipped where everyone could see it. "Mr. Coleman," I said, "this is a place of care, not conflict." He took in the lobby, dogs dozing, a toddler in a dinosaur hoodie clutching a carrier with a tired kitten inside, a display of donated blankets folded like invitations. He lowered his voice, which somehow made it more dangerous. "You are making a scene of this town," he said. "You are making us look small." "I am not making anything," I said. "I am living in my house and running my husband's practice by the law he wrote." "You could be generous," he said. "You could return heirlooms. You could sell the practice to family." I looked at the bulletin board where thank you cards crowded the cork, crayon drawings of pets with big hearts around them, photographs of healed creatures, a letter from a second grader that read, "Thank you for fixing my turtle." "I am generous," I said. "I am generous to the people who came here for help." He leaned closer. "You are not blood," he said, like a curse he needed me to repeat. I did not step back. "I am his wife," I said, like a vow renewed in a lobby with linoleum floors, "and you are trespassing on my patience." Our head tech, a woman whose calm has lowered more fevers than aspirin, appeared at my shoulder with impeccable timing. "Mr. Coleman," she said, polite as a bell, "we can walk you to the door now, or we can call someone in a uniform to do it later. Which do you prefer?" He stared at her, at me, at the clients who had gone quiet. Then he remembered something important. This town knew my husband by his work, and they knew me by mine. He turned without a word and left. The door closed on lingering pride. The next day, the Coleman Council withdrew the intent to contest. Not a confession, a calculation. The clause had done its job without drawing blood. Charles called with the update and added one sentence I did not expect but needed. "You are doing well," he said. "Not just legally, humanly." After I hung up, I sat in the rocker and read the letter again. There was a line I had skimmed in those first brutal days that now stepped forward and asked to be heard. Marcus had written, "There is a difference between family history and family character. Choose the latter." I chose it every hour that week. In how I answered emails, in how I said no without rage, in how I said yes to help. On Saturday, I hosted a quiet potluck in our backyard for clinic staff and rescue volunteers, folding tables, paper plates, laughter that started at the edges and moved toward the middle. We lit a string of thrifted cafe lights and told the kind of stories grief can share with joy without either one feeling cheated. When the night cooled, Tamara slipped in through the side gate, face unsure. I handed her a plate. "I am sorry," she said, "for how we behaved, for how I did not stop them." "Thank you," I said, "for seeing it." She nodded and stayed an hour. Her youngest chased lightning bugs with the same intensity I recognized in his father when furniture was on the move. I sent them home with leftovers wrapped in foil and a hope that a different pattern could be taught. The house felt right when the last guest left. Not victorious, just right. A place set back on its foundations, with new bolts holding, with wind able to pass through without shaking the frame. Grief is not only crying, it is paperwork, casseroles, random kindness, and sudden weather in the chest. It is also echoes, people repeating back to you who you have been in their lives. The memorial evening at the clinic gave me 100 echoes. A firefighter came in uniform and stood at the table where we had set framed photos and a dish for tea lights. He said Marcus had once driven out on a Sunday to stitch his daughter's rabbit because the girl had saved her allowance and brought cash in a sock. He said he would not let me pay, and then he paid for the next 10 vaccinations in line. A middle school teacher told me she now keeps a small fund in her desk for kids whose pets get sick. Marcus called it the mercy envelope, she said. He told me he wished more people would keep one, so I do. A man I did not recognize waited until the lobby cleared. He introduced himself as the contractor who had built the porch ramp years ago. "I underbid by accident," he said, embarrassed by the memory. "Your husband never mentioned it. He just paid the invoice and brought me coffee while I worked. I never forgot. He set a donation in the jar for the rescue and left like a person who preferred work to talk. The next morning, I walked to the corner cafe. The owner set down a mug and said, "On the house." She tapped the tip jar and said, "People have been leaving notes for you. We keep them in a box." Inside, folded slips. Some with names, some with only a line. My favorite read, "Saw what they tried. Saw what you did. Good." News about the Colemans continued its slow work. Patricia lost a board seat, not because anyone wanted to punish her, but because new leadership wanted to stop apologizing for old behavior. Gerald found a position with honest hours and less attention. Timothy moved 2 counties over where his last name did not introduce him before his work did. Raymond remained, because men like him do not leave the ground they believe they made. I saw him once from across a parking lot. He looked smaller in the distance, as if pride leaks air when it has to carry itself. I felt no thrill, no sting, only the cool sensation that arrives when a fever breaks. I went home and wrote my Sunday letter. I told Marcus the clinic was steady, the porch rail was fixed, and the rocker had found the light again. I told him the dog still checked his side of the bed before settling for mine. I told him the town had remembered his work in the way that matters, by doing some of it. That week, the museum asked if I would help plan a small fundraiser for the rescue. Not a gala, a community night. Live music from a high school jazz trio, a silent auction of practical things people actually want. A table where kids could draw their pets and tape the pictures to a wall that read, in big letters, "Thank you for loving me." I said yes. I printed lists, I called vendors who owed me nothing and received everything I asked for because reputation is a currency that spends well when it has been earned in ordinary daylight. The night shone without sparkle. People gave what they could. We counted the envelope after cleanup and laughed at the number like kids with a secret. It would cover a month of food and 2 surgeries and 1 more ramp somewhere. At the end of the evening, the director handed me a folded note. "A donor asked me to pass this along," she said. Inside was a bank check for a modest amount and 3 words in a severe hand. "For the animals." The signature line was blank, but the handwriting was not. Patricia had found a language she could manage. The money went to the fund without a ribbon. I slept that night without waking. The body knows when a door has latched. Winter came clean, sky bright as bone. I moved in rhythms that made sense and did not require apology. Morning coffee, clinic decisions, walks with the dog along a river that remembers every flood and still shines, Sunday letters. In January, the associate doctor sat with me and proposed a timeline to complete the purchase of the practice by summer. They had prepared a binder with tabs and modest goals. They did not promise the moon. They promised to keep the lights on and the Mercy envelope full. We signed a term sheet that afternoon. They cried again. I did not, which surprised me. The joy felt calm, like a hand finding a railing in the dark. I met with a contractor about small changes to the house I had been afraid to make before. Paint that loved light. Shelves where books had been in stacks for years. A new fence with a gate that swung without squeaking. "We can do it in stages," he said. "No rush." I liked that his plan respected grief's calendar. I updated my own will with provisions that sounded like me. The house would go to my sister's kids when they were ready, not when anyone else demanded it. The practice proceeds would endow a fund for clients who needed time to pay. A letter would sit on top, written in my hand, that said, "If you ever marry, marry a person who plans for your safety even when love is loud." On a clear afternoon, I took the train to the courthouse to record the final deed paperwork in person. I wanted to see the stamp go down. I wanted the clerk to hand me copies that smelled like ink and weight. She looked at the documents, looked at me, and said, "You are squared away." That phrase, simple as bread, felt like a crown that did not glitter and did not pinch. On Main Street, I ran into the oncologist outside a bookstore. We spoke in the warm shorthand of people who have shared a hard season. She asked about me. I asked about her. Before we parted, she touched my sleeve and said, You did right by him. I carried those 6 words home like a flame in a cupped hand. Sometime in late winter, Raymond left a single message on the clinic's general line. It was short. "I underestimated you," he said. Then silence. No apology, no ask. A mark on a timeline. I saved it for an afternoon and then deleted it on purpose. Not out of anger, out of cleanliness. The practice sale closed in early spring. We celebrated in the break room with store-bought cake that tasted exactly like every office cake and therefore perfect. The staff gave me a framed collage of thank you notes from clients written over many years. In the center, they had placed a photo of Marcus, laughing at something the receptionist had said off camera. I hung it in the hallway where the best light lives. I kept the house. I kept the rocker in its place. I kept a rule. Each event that crossed my desk would be measured against dignity before it was measured against budget. I turned down a lucrative request from a developer who wanted to throw a party to rebrand a neighborhood he had priced its people out of. I accepted a smaller contract from a shelter that needed a clean room and a clean run of show and 5 extra tables for walk-ins. I slept better the nights I chose the second type. On the first warm Saturday of spring, I opened all the windows and cleaned until the rooms smelled like lemon and future. I set 3 chairs by the door for guests who might arrive unsure if they were welcome. I put a small sign on the entry table, handwritten and clear. You belong here. The doorbell rang. Neighbors, staff, rescue volunteers, my sister, her kids. We ate on the porch. The dog begged in polite circles. When the sun slid down, I stood in the doorway and watched the house hold everyone without strain. The rooms did not remember shouting. They remembered laughter and the click of plates and the soft thud of a child's feet running to the kitchen to ask for more ice. Later, after the dishes, after the quiet, I sat in the rocker with the letter and read the last paragraph out loud to the empty room. Choose character over history, Marcus had written. Choose love over lineage. Choose law over threats. Choose home. I do, I said into the calm. I keep choosing. I turned off the lights. The house settled around me like a yes. Probate court did not look like television. No marble thunder, no speeches. Just a beige room with steady lights and a judge who wore her robe like a well-ironed fact. Charles sat to my left. I placed both feet flat on the floor, the way I do before lifting a patient whose weight might surprise me. Our matter was brief. The judge reviewed filings that had already been reviewed by clerks and common sense. She asked 2 clarifying questions and nodded twice in a way that told me she had seen this pattern before. People mistaking tradition for title, volume for validity, bloodline myths for law. Mrs. Coleman, she said, voice even, the will is valid. The deed is clear. You are confirmed as the sole owner of the real property and the personal estate. The practice transfer is acknowledged and recorded. Thank you, Your Honor, Charles said. The gavel did not bang. A pen tapped once, which felt cleaner. We stood. I breathed. A woman with a stack of files smiled at me as if to say, "You did the paperwork. Now go live your life." Outside, sunlight hit the courthouse steps like forgiveness. Charles tucked copies into his briefcase and gave me the look he reserves for good endings. "Food?" he asked. "Food," I agreed. Over sandwiches, we planned the last administrative turns. One final notice to the Coleman Council closing the probate, a recorded memorandum regarding the practice sale timeline, a letter to clients assuring continuity of care. He slid a small folder across the table. Inside, a checklist titled After. Things you forget when the storm ends. Replace smoke detector batteries. Update emergency contacts. Remove his old email from two-factor logins. The list made me laugh in relief. "We try," he said. That afternoon at the clinic, the staff gathered in the treatment area where stainless steel gleamed like calm. We taped the probate confirmation to the office corkboard under a heading that read simply, "Done." The head tech clapped once, loudly, like a heartbeat returning to baseline. Someone brought a cake from the grocery. We did not bother with plates. That week, a former client stopped me in the produce aisle. "We heard the court put it to rest," she said. "Good." Then she lowered her voice. "He came by my husband's hardware store yesterday, your father-in-law. He still talks big. Smaller audience, though." "Thank you," I said. On Friday evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a fresh notebook. Title on the first page, House Care, Year 1. I wrote a simple plan. Spring, paint the second bedroom a color that holds morning. Summer, repair porch lattice. Autumn, plant daffodils along the back fence so spring can arrive even when I forget to expect it. Winter, refinish the floors in the hall so the light can travel farther. I put the notebook in the drawer with Marcus's letter. Paper shields, living love. Plans are not only for defense, they are also for joy. Saturday brought a small test in a public place. I was paying for a lamp at the consignment store when Patricia entered, pearls shining with the determination of a person who refuses to dim. She froze when she saw me, then recovered into a smile that looked like it had been ironed too hot. Two women near the register went quiet, the way people do when the news they read becomes the life they are in. "Mrs. Coleman," Patricia said, choosing formality like armor. "I trust you are managing." "I am," I said. "Thank you." She gestured toward a shelf of china. "There are patterns here that belong to our family history." I met her eyes. "There are patterns I will not repeat," I said softly. "One of them is allowing you to define what belongs to me." Color rose on her neck. She reached for hauteur and found only air. "For the sake of appearances," she said, as if invoking a spell. "For the sake of decency," I said, as if ending one. "Please address anything further through counsel." The clerk cleared her throat and told me the lamp had been marked down that morning. I paid and left. Outside, the air felt new. That night, I wrote my Sunday letter. Today, dignity did not need witnesses, but it had them anyway. 2 weeks later, the rescue held the community night at the museum. The high school jazz trio played standards with the joy of people who have found a pocket they can share. Kids drew their pets with colors that never existed on fur and taped the art to a wall that became a chorus. We sold exactly the right number of brownies. The director whispered the total in my ear. It was not headline money. It was hay and medicine and one more surgery. We both laughed at the goodness of that math. On the way out, the guard at the door, same kind eyes as the man who had found me in a quiet gallery months ago, said, "This felt right." I agreed. Inheritance is not a set of items. What you keep, what you return, what you refuse to pass down. I locked the house and went to bed. I slept without bracing. Spring warmed the city until magnolias opened like careful hands. The practice sale moved forward on schedule. We signed the definitive documents in a conference room that smelled like dry erase markers and good coffee. The associates would take full ownership by midsummer with conditions Marcus would have loved written into the bones. The Mercy envelope funded, free spay days kept alive, staff profit share guaranteed before any owner bonus. After the last signature, we cried. Again. Then we cleaned the table and returned to charts and calls because animals do not hold for ceremony. A week later, a plain envelope arrived without a return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I underestimated you. The handwriting was Raymond's, stripped of swagger, no signature, no request. A period at the end of a long, bad sentence. I put the page in the file called Records, Not Truths, and felt something unclench that had not been clenching for days. In May, I visited the cemetery on a Thursday morning when the groundskeeper was watering the new grass. I read Marcus my letter out loud, voice steady, the way I used to read discharge instructions to clients who were worried they would forget. When I finished, the groundskeeper tipped his cap. "He must have been a good one," he said. "He was," I answered, "and careful." I stopped by the clinic on the way home to drop off a pan of brownies because sugar is its own language. In the lobby, a boy cared for a cardboard box with the seriousness of a surgeon. Inside, a nest of towels and one injured pigeon. "We can help," the receptionist told him, and the boy's shoulders released. I felt Marcus in that room as plainly as if he had leaned on the counter and asked where the good tape was. The same afternoon, Tamara texted to ask if we could meet for coffee. We sat on the patio at a place with bright chairs and excellent shade. She looked tired, not from cruelty, but from cleaning up after it. "The kids are okay," she said. "Gerald is learning." She wrinkled her nose at the word, and we both laughed at the understatement. "I am sorry," she said again, "for my silence, for the promises we made out loud to our children without checking the facts." "Thank you," I said. "How are you?" "We are renting a smaller place," she said. The kids drew their rooms on paper and taped them to the wall and said it was enough. It was. We talked about school projects and summer camps and how to teach boys that strength looks like returning a chair you should not have taken. Before we left, she pressed an envelope into my palm. "For the rescue," she said. "From us." Inside, 20s folded into the shape of resolve. June brought the closing on the practice. We took a photo out front under the sign where Marcus's name would remain as founder. It matters to keep a name where it earned its place, not where it was demanded. I handed over the keys and kept one copy of the alarm code in case of true emergencies. The door clicked behind me. I stood on the sidewalk and let the quiet arrive. There is a particular stillness when a chapter ends well. At home, I opened the house care notebook and checked off 2 lines. Porch lattice repaired. Back bedroom painted. I wrote a new one. Plant herbs for summer. Basil, thyme, rosemary, and mint. Because refreshing things should be within reach. On a warm Sunday, my sister came over with her kids. We cooked too much food and left the dishes until morning like teenagers with better priorities. After dinner, we sat on the steps and watched the street find its evening. "You look like yourself," Janet said. "I feel like myself," I answered. It was not the same self that had stood shaking in the doorway months ago. It was a self with edges smoothed by right action repeated. A self with a spine supported by paper and people and the memory of a man who planned love like infrastructure. Before bed, I wrote my weekly letter. It had only 3 sentences. The house is steady. The work is good. I am safe. By July, heat lay over Richmond like a soft blanket. The house held cool mornings and slow evenings. Neighbors waved with the ease of people who had weathered a season together and decided to remain kind. 1 year seemed far away and somehow present. Grief had changed shape. It showed up in specific songs, in the smell of rain on hot pavement, in the way my hand still reached for a second coffee mug before memory caught up and set it back. Joy had changed shape, too. It showed up as quiet competence, as a yes said without apology, as a lamp throwing warm light across a freshly painted wall. On a Tuesday, the museum director called. A donor wanted to fund a small scholarship in Marcus's name for students studying veterinary medicine with a commitment to wildlife rescue or low-cost community care. "We will make it practical," she said. "Books and rent, not gala tickets." I said yes and cried after we hung up because that was the kind of legacy he would have wanted. Not an engraving, but a door propped open. On a Thursday, the rescue posted a photo of a young volunteer releasing a hawk at dawn. The caption mentioned a doctor who used to stand in that same field. I stared at the picture until the screen blurred, then laughed at myself for being human, and turned the phone off and went outside to weed the herb bed. The mint had tried to take over. I cut it back. Some things need boundaries, even when they smell like summer. Late in the month, I received an invitation to a community awards dinner. Not a black tie event. A room above the library where the air conditioner worked hard and everyone clapped loud. They gave me a certificate for steadfast stewardship. I accepted it for us, not for me. The applause sounded like a porch full of friends. On the drive home, I passed the hardware store. The owner waved from the doorway and held up a new key cutter as if presenting a trophy. I thought about keys. How many had changed hands in the last months? How many locks had learned my name? Keys are small, but they mean who gets to rest inside. That night I sat in the rocker with the windows open. Crickets sang in patient numbers. I opened Marcus's letter and read the final paragraph again. Choose character over history. Choose love over lineage. Choose law over threats. Choose home. "I do," I said, and the house answered back in small sounds. Wood settling, a dog sighing, a summer night forgiving the day. I wrote one last entry in the house care notebook for the season. Extra chairs by the door for guests who arrive unsure. I found 2 sturdy ones at the thrift store, sanded them, and painted them a gentle green. I placed them near the entry table with a handwritten sign. "You belong here." It was a design choice. It was also an oath. When August came, I hosted a backyard supper for clinic friends, neighbors, rescue volunteers, and the museum crew. The menu was simple, the laughter complicated in the best way. We lit strings of cafe lights and made a toast with lemonade. No speeches, no spectacle, just a room without walls where no one had to ask if there was a place for them to sit. Near midnight, after the last pan was washed and set to dry, I walked through the house, turning off lights. In the hall, the floor shone like a path. In the back bedroom, the new paint held the moon. In the living room, the rocker waited in its patch of windowed light for morning. I touched the safe, not to open it, but to remember. Inside was paper, and in the rooms around it was everything the paper had protected. I went to bed and slept. The future did not feel like a test. It felt like a key I already held. There is a bowl on my entry table that holds keys. Not many, just the ones that matter. House, clinic, now for emergencies only. Mailbox, a small brass tag from the wildlife rescue that makes the dog wag when it clinks. Some mornings I stand there with coffee and tip the bowl slightly, listening to the soft ring of metal. It sounds like a promise kept. The house has settled into its new season. Floors gleam, not because they are new, but because hands that love them have learned how to bring back shine. The rocker sits in the window patch where morning gathers first. On the kitchen wall hangs a small calendar with pencil notes that read like a prayer made of errands. Call the doctor about the pigeon. Drop brownies at the clinic. Mulch the herb bed. Sign the museum paperwork. Buy stamps. The life I keep is not glamorous. It is exact, and it is mine. Sometimes people ask me how I did it. How I stood in a doorway and told a patriarch to put down a chair he had decided was his. How I held steady when grief and outrage braided together and tried to pull me under. They want a single trick, a line from a movie, a speech that unlocked a door. There was no speech. There was paper. There was a man who loved me enough to write his love into deeds and clauses, and a letter that would land like a hand on my back when I needed it. There was a lawyer who spoke in paragraphs that did not shake. There was a town that remembered work more than gossip. There was a woman, me, who chose decency over spectacle and documentation over shouting. Here is what I keep: keys and chairs and paper and light. Keys because safety is a daily act. Chairs because there will always be a guest who arrives unsure, and I will always have a place ready. Paper because love that plans is love that lasts. Light because rooms tell the truth when you let them. If you ever find yourself standing in a doorway while someone tries to take what your life built, breathe. Call the person who knows the law. Let fools document themselves. Keep your voice low and your spine high. Make your lists. Water your herbs. Read the letter from the person who saw you clearly. Then turn the lock that has your name on it and go to sleep in your own bed. Morning will come. It always does. Count from 1 and let the numbers lead forward. Next week's story begins with a different door and a familiar sentence. It's family property. A will, a safe deposit box, and a nephew with a plan meet a woman who reads the fine print out loud. The bill arrives. So does the truth. If anyone ever told you there was no chair with your name on it, come closer. We saved you a seat.